All right, let's talk about a phrase you've probably used maybe even just this week. It sounds super responsible, right? But what if it's actually the one thing that's holding you back? I mean, come on. We've all said it. It just sounds so put together, so competent, and anyone who hears it just nods along. But, and this is a big but, there's a catch. And that right there is the big question we're tackling. When you say you're lining up your ducks, are you really getting ready to launch? Or are you just building a really beautiful, sophisticated excuse to stay right where you are? Yeah, see, this phrase kind of has a secret identity. On one hand, it's all about doing your due diligence. You know, the stuff that prevents total disaster. But on the other hand, oh, it can be this really clever trap. One we set for ourselves to avoid the scary, messy part of actually getting started. And this is where we need to draw a really clear line in the sand. Think about it. A pilot doing a pre-flight checklist, a surgeon looking at an MRI before they cut. Okay, that's absolutely essential prep, non-negotiable. But the entrepreneur who spends months perfecting a business plan without ever talking to a customer, or the writer who just keeps reorganizing their research notes instead of, writing, that's not preparation. Nope, that's hiding. So what's the deal? Why is this so alluring? Why do we love lining up those ducks so much? Well, it really boils down to psychology. It's about how we handle uncertainty and our deep, deep need to feel like we're in control. Okay, here's the fundamental trade we're making, whether we realize it or not. Starting something new, it's messy, it's unpredictable. And that uncertainty, it feels awful. So what do? Instead of leaning into that discomfort, we retreat. We fall back to something that feels safe, certain, and totally controllable, organizing. And you know what? The psychological payoff for this is huge. Lining up our ducks, well, it makes us feel busy. It makes us feel productive. It gives us this incredible illusion of control. And most importantly, it keeps us safe from the risk of actually trying and maybe failing. It's a really cozy place to hang out. But here's the reality check. All that activity, all that organizing, it's not actually progress. You're not moving toward the finish line. You're just moving sideways. You're keeping busy while that starting line doesn't get any closer. There's actually a perfect math term for this whole phenomenon. It's called an asymptote. Think back to geometry class. It's that line a curve gets infinitely close to, but it never ever touches it. And that's exactly what this is in our lives. It's this state of endless preparation. We get closer and closer to being ready, but we never actually feel like we can start. Because there's always one more book to read, one more spreadsheet to build, just one more duck to nudge into place. Okay, so how in the world do we break out of this loop? We have to do something that feels totally backward. We need to flip the script with a strategy called Ready, Fire, Aim. So here's the breakdown, and it's simpler than you think. First, ready. And this is key. It means get the absolute basics ready. Not perfection, just the essentials. Then, step 2, fire. This is the big one. You just go. You take action. You launch the thing. You write that messy, awful first draft. And it's only after you've fired that you get to step 3, aim. Now you get to adjust and correct your course, but you're doing it based on real-world data, not just guessing. See, here's the paradigm shift. Action isn't the final step. It's a form of research. When you're doing something new, there's only so much you can learn from planning in a vacuum. The really valuable information, the stuff that actually matters, comes from doing. It comes from seeing what happens when your idea meets the real world. Okay, I get it. This sounds great in theory, but how do you actually know when it's time to stop prepping and just go? Well, there's a really practical concept for this. Let's call it the good enough threshold. Look, the goal is not perfect 100% readiness. Let's just be honest. That day is never going to arrive. The real goal is to get to the point where any more preparation gives you less and less of a return. You've hit the point of diminishing returns. That's your signal. So here it is. This is the one question to burn into your brain. The next time you find yourself about to just tweak one more thing, stop and ask yourself this. Is this action making me meaningfully more prepared to succeed, or is it just making me marginally more comfortable right now? Your honest answer to that question, it tells you everything you need to know. And listen, this isn't just some abstract theory. This way of thinking is the secret engine behind some of the most successful projects and creative breakthroughs out there. Let's take a look at what this actually looks like in the real world. You really do see this pattern play out everywhere. In entrepreneurship, the trap is that perfect business plan nobody's ever seen. The solution? A minimum viable product or MVP that you get out into the world to see how people react. For a writer, the trap is the flawless, detailed outline, and the solution is that bad first draft that actually exists on paper. And for all of us, in our own personal decisions, the trap is analysis paralysis. The solution is just making a decision, any decision, and trusting that you're smart enough to adjust your course along the way. There's this quote that just nails it perfectly. A bad first draft is 1,000,000 times better than a perfect outline that never turns into anything. Why? Because you can fix a bad draft. You can improve something that exists, but you can't do anything with a perfect idea that's just stuck in your head. So really, what this all boils down to is this. That endless pursuit of perfection, it's usually just fear wearing a really convincing costume. You have to be willing to look at your row of ducks and say, you know what? This is good enough. Because sometimes good enough is the magic password that finally lets you start. And so I'll leave you with this question. I want you to think about your own life, your own projects, your own big goals. Picture all those ducks you've been so carefully lining up, and ask yourself, really, honestly, what truly important, maybe even scary action are they a convenient excuse to avoid?